Foundation has been promoting equitable access to life opportunities for STEM education recipients. Their annual internship programs match university students with information and communication technology professionals as they collaborate on open source software projects. And as I told you guys on Monday, our idea of having this course be linked to an open source project, the idea came from David Bain and from Mr. Harrison to link it to projects that are local, to something that is a Jamaican based or Jamaican brand. And so Palisadoes Foundation is that opportunity for us. And we're very, very, very happy to have Mr. Harrison here with us. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot for letting me speak about the Palisadoes Foundation and the Talawa project. And I'm just going to go straight into it. I have a lot of slides, and we can probably ask the questions at the very end. But I really would encourage you to jot down some questions at the very end to ask about what we're trying to do, about the various projects that we have, and just the general goals of the Palisadoes Foundation and Talawa in general. So, to talk about the Palisadoes Foundation, we are a non-profit organization. We're based in the United States, and we're promoting software engineering and technology. And we have a number of IT professionals who are volunteers. We have both private and public and corporate sponsors. We've been a participant in the Google Summer of Code and also the Indian-based GitHub externship program as well. And we have a number of different types of paid internships. The first set are the ones that I just mentioned, the Google Summer of Code and the GitHub externship. The Google Summer of Code is open to all students from across the world, and they are allowed to work on an open source project under the guidance of a mentor. Upon achieving predefined goals, they get stipends that are paid. And we started out the Palisadoes Foundation hoping to see how we could get into the Google Summer of Code or just get into open source projects in general. And we were unsuccessful because we were such a new organization. And so what we decided to do was to create something very similar, which is the Calico Challenge, in which it's based in Jamaica, doing the same thing. And we created a number of open source projects, and we've been learning along the way. And some projects fail, some projects have succeeded. I want to talk about one of them that has succeeded very well, and I'm going to make mention of another one very shortly as well. So we have a number of current and past sponsors. The most obvious ones are Google and GitHub. And then we also have a number of sponsors in Jamaica as well. The JPS Foundation, the NCB Foundation, Grace Kennedy Foundation, the JMMB Group, and a number of others throughout the island. So we have a project vision just in general about what we're trying to do with the projects overall. And we want to make sure that all the projects that we have some sort of a global reach. And that may mean a cloud service, or it could also mean that it could be used universally by anybody with a laptop or a desktop or something, that they can actually get stuff working. And we are really trying to work and focus on underserved regions. And the reason for that is because we as Jamaicans understand some of the difficulties that underserved regions have. And that may be from the developing world, or it could also be forgotten regions around the world, in inner cities, for example, or rural areas, etc. And we're trying to find projects that would spur economic development of some sort. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's directly related to economic development, but it means that the projects that we have some way of impacting the wider community. And most importantly, we need to have projects that are income earning. And the reason for this is because I've mentioned a number of these sponsors in the past, but they are not reliable. And for very many reasons. They have different priorities, the economy goes up and down, etc. And so what we're trying to do is to try to find ways in which the Palisadoes Foundation can earn an income, and then the money that comes from that income can then be turned around and used to sponsor or partially fund some of the internships that we have. So the projects that I'm going to be talking about are one step along that path. So the one I want to talk about is the Talawa mobile app. It's a community group management system, and we are really trying to aim it towards clubs, neighborhood groups, volunteer organizations, nonprofits, small religious institutions. It's a mixture of Instagram, LinkedIn, Google Calendar, WhatsApp. So it has some chat features, it has a news feed, it has calendaring, things like that. And I'll go in and talk about some of the things that it can do. But the calendaring part is fairly interesting because it has some very lightweight project management applications. So say, for example, you're a member of a church, for example, and you want to have a calendar event, which would be like a wedding. You can assign different roles and responsibilities to people who are attending the event. So somebody who's interested in flowers, somebody's handling the transportation, someone's handling the food, those sorts of things, and you have a list of who's responsible for what to make things better. You can have events that also get tied to physical locations, so not just having the event, but it could be tied to a football field or it could be tied to a conference room, those sorts of things. We're trying to find ways in which it could be universally usable across various types of organizations. So I know you're an architecture class, and so I wanted to make sure that we spoke about the architecture of the Talawa app before we get into some of the other details of it. And so this is essentially what it's all about. We have the mobile app, and the mobile app then communicates with the API backend. And it uses various types of methodologies, but the API backend uses Node.js and GraphQL as the methodologies of presenting an API interface. And the API then stores data in a database. It stores objects like videos and images and files and those sorts of things in an object store. It handles emailing, and then there's a plugin system so that people could add in things like a donation plugin or a plugin that would handle unique situations for a particular type of organization. And then on top of all of this, we need to find a way in which the whole thing can be administered through a web portal. And so you have the mobile app, it communicates with the API backend, but then the senior management team or the pastor, or whoever it is, needs to be able to log in and then add new sub-organizations, maybe ban users or add new users, depending on how things go. So there are features and functionalities that are based around these three core repositories. And so there's the admin portal, which is the management side, the API, and the mobile app. So let's just go and quickly talk about them. We have three different GitHub repositories. The first is Talawa, which is a Flutter app-based application. And then we have the API, which uses MongoDB, Node.js, and GraphQL. And then also we have Talawa admin, which uses React. So we have other projects that use Python, because I know that you guys focus on Python. It's called Patu. It also uses a Node.js middleware API backend. It has a mobile app on the front end using Flutter, and then it also has a React-based admin portal as well. But it's just that the API middleware uses Python SQL Alchemy as an ORM for various reasons. And Talawa and Patu is a time series database, so you can chart things over time, things like stock prices or temperatures in a room and things like that. And so it's more for charting and graphing, and then this thing is more for community-based type activities. So if you're interested, you can look at both. But I really want to focus on Talawa primarily because there are income earning opportunities for the Palisades Foundation with it, if we can find a way to launch it as a cloud service with a subscription model. So I just want to talk about some key GitHub concepts because some of you may or may not have been exposed to GitHub. And I'm going to be using some terminologies throughout the rest of the presentation. And some of these terms I think you're going to need to just have a rough understanding of before we go any further. So we're going to talk about a GitHub repository. People often call it a repo. And it's essentially a place where you can store documentation or code. We have one repo per project. There's a Talawa API, Talawa admin, and most importantly, Talawa docs. So all our documentation is also stored in GitHub. And I'm going to show you how that works. But all the documentation that you see, if you go to the various repositories that we have, there's a link to our documentation site, or that documentation site is automatically generated from the Talawa docs Git repository. And then we have the concept of an issue. And I'm sorry, there's a guy doing vacuuming in the background, but hopefully you can hear what I'm saying. And so an issue is just a formal request for a change. So if you find something that is of interest, something that's not functioning properly, you put in an issue in the form of a bug type issue or a feature issue or a documentation issue. And these are the types of things that trigger some sort of action. And people will be constantly looking at the issues that are there. And if they think there's something interesting, they will actually work on it. And then there's a pull request, and it's just basically a request to add changes related to the issues in the repository. So if somebody has discovered that they can fix the problem, they modify the code in their local machine, they say, oh, this looks great, and then they issue a pull request, and they say that this pull request is tied to a particular issue. And as a result of that, starts the process of us getting change. And finally, there's a thing called a GitHub action. And a GitHub action is just an automated activity. And we have GitHub actions that are triggered based on new issues or new pull requests. And some of the things that happen as a result of that are things like if you do a pull request, it'll double check to make sure that all the automated testing has been done, that the percentage coverage of testing has reached its required numbers and things like that. So just want to give you some grounding because, like I said, we're going to be talking about some stuff. So if you look at our repositories, there are a number of important links that I think you should take a look at. The first one is the link for the issues, and you can click on the link and you'll see all the issues that are there. There's also a link to all the pull requests that are happening. You can also get a link to the documentation website that we have. Let's see what else there is. Oh, up in the top right-hand corner, you'll see a link to all the forks. And the forks are all the various copies that people have of the repository that people have done for themselves so that they can make changes locally and then merge those changes into the pull request system that we have. And then if you're really wondering how to contribute, all the repositories have a contributing file that's here. And then finally, if you really want to get just the basics of what's going on, there's also a README file in all the repositories. Now I chose the Talawa docs repository most importantly because any modifications that you make through pull requests, any pull requests that are activated and accepted, automatically trigger updates in the Palisades Foundation Talawa website. And so I just wanted to let you all be aware of that. So this is the important set of repo links. And then now we're going to get right into the meat of things, if that's okay. So firstly, I want to make sure that everybody understands there's a lot of coding opportunities and non-coding opportunities. And these things are like finding and filing bugs, just going through, checking, see things. Do things break? Just put in an issue, say that this thing doesn't work. You look at the code, it says, well, that workflow doesn't look right. Maybe this screen should come before that one. Create an issue suggesting features. Go through again, just manually testing, making sure that everything looks right, that there's no red screen sections in the Flutter code when it displays on the mobile app. Just go through basic security reviews, improving the user experience, and just general program and project management type activities, helping with the creation of the roadmap definition, those sorts of things. I mean, everybody talks about creating software and coding, and this is the really great stuff. But man, there's a whole lot of stuff that is undervalued in the coding world. And I really want to make sure that people understand that there's lots of related things. because when you compare it to all the things I could think of in terms of coding opportunities, I could only think of 4, whereas I could think of a few dozen for non-coding opportunities. And of course, that is simplifying things because I really want to have more people talking about non-coding opportunities. But with coding opportunities, there's automated testing, want to fix the bugs, adding the new features, refactoring the code. We had students came in for the Google Summer of Code this year, took a look at the code and said, man, we need to refactor this completely. And they rewrote it completely using the MVVM architecture. And we have a much better product right now. So we had some goals for 2021. We wanted to try and see how we could have Talawa launched as a cloud service so that we could charge a subscription fee on a monthly basis and then use that money to turn it around, like I'd mentioned, to sponsoring students. And we wanted to find a way in which we could host multiple organizations. So for example, if you're a member, or like say for example, you're a head office for a company, you could have people working in the system with sub-offices in like Savlamar, Spanish Town, Montego Bay, Santa Cruz, places like that. And so we wanted to make sure that we had that flexibility. And we have that ability. The API can handle multiple organizations on the various routes that it has. We wanted to have improved stability. We wanted to have 100% automated testing. We wanted to have encryption of personally identifiable information. And that has a number of architectural types of things to be considered. How do you encrypt it? How do you decrypt it? Where do the keys get stored? What sort of encryption mechanism do you need? What happens if we need to change the keys? Does that automatically scramble everything and nobody can get stuff? So there are a number of things that we needed to make sure. And another thing, very importantly, is that the installation needs to be easy. If the installation isn't easy, no one's going to use it. And so we wanted to make sure that that also happened. And the documentation also needed to be very usable. And with all of that, we managed to achieve a number of things. We created the admin panel, the Talawa admin thing that I spoke about. We did the multi-organizational support. We did a complete UI UX redesign. If you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see that. We've also implemented the MVVM architecture, and we've got around 30% automated test code coverage, and we really need to get that up to 100%. So if you're into React, into Flutter, into any of Node.js, please volunteer to help out with some of this automated code test coverage. That would be a relatively easy thing to do. And we've also done multilingual support. So the Talawa app at the moment, this is part of the architecture. We, from the very beginning, can handle multiple languages. And so when you install the app, it'll ask you whether you want to use it in Chinese or Hindi or Spanish or English or whatever it is. And the students this year figured out a way to create multilingual support right through the application. And so that has been that is one of the things that I really wanted to make sure that we had built in from the very beginning, because if not, doing that later on was just going to be very painful. And we also created a light and dark mode, and we've done some rudimentary plugin support using webhooks. So these are types of things that have happened. So there's a roadmap that we have. For 2021, we want to complete all those 2021 goals that I mentioned, and we really would like to have a minimum viable product by the end of 2021, so that we can show it to organizations, probably in Jamaica, show it to churches, show it to whoever, to say, is this exactly what you want? Why? If not, why? Let's try and figure out some new features that we can then add in for 2022. And in 2022, we want to make sure that we have robust plugin support and a robust cloud service capability. And so, for example, we want to make sure that we can handle donations, for example, and that they interact with the most well-known payment processors like PayPal or MasterCard or one of those things. We need to find ways in which that can be done, or Square, those sorts of interactions. And we need to have potentially a Square plugin, PayPal plugin, or whatever, and then people can choose which one people can use for making donations to the organization through their mobile app and figuring out how to store credit card information or those sorts of things. So we need to have some way of creating a plug-in system as a part of our overall architecture methodology. And so there are a number of possible ideas. I know that we're short. I don't want to go through all of them. I'm sure you'll get a copy of this PDF when the class is all finished. But these are a number of things that we can think of in terms of new ideas for the app. Facilities registrations, like I was mentioning, which was if you have an event, you may want to tie it to a conference room, etc. And then that way you know whether the conference room is booked or not booked. Then doing things like social media reminders, outreach management, and things like that, groups management, whether you're going to have private groups or public groups. So for example, a private group may be Alcoholics Anonymous group in which you don't want anybody to know what's going on, but you may have a public group which could be like a prayer meeting or a company all hands meeting that may have something that be tied to it. And one of the features that we have with groups and our events is that when you have an event, it automatically creates the equivalent of a WhatsApp group around that event so that you can create a buzz around it. So for example, if you register for a concert, everybody that has registered for it automatically gets part of this group, and they can start talking about who's going to perform, who's going to be doing this sort of stuff. So there are things that we thought about that WhatsApp doesn't really do a good job of. WhatsApp does one thing and one thing only. We wanted to try and find a way to make this sort of more universally accessible. So I want to talk about potential sample activity with the repository. And so one of the things that could be done is you find something like we wanting to get 100% test coverage. And one of the things that you could do is to go into the repository, create a parent issue, just say we want to have 100% test coverage. And then you go through and identify all the folders with files that need tests. And once you've done that, you create a GitHub test coverage child issue for each file. So you say, do 100% code coverage for file A, 100% for file B, file C, file D, file E, file F. All of those would be individual issues. And then from there, you would create a link from the parent issue to all the child issues, and each child issue would have a link back to the parent. And with GitHub, you'll get green check marks or X's beside the names of each of those issues when you put the link in, whenever those issues are completed or solved or not. So somebody can look at the parent issue and say, oh, I'll work on this child issue. And so it makes it more user friendly, and people have a better idea as to what's going on. So it doesn't seem to be a complete free for all. And we've done that a number of times. We've encouraged people to create the parent issue, create the child issue, and then that just breaks up the work into smaller pieces that can then be handled by individual people. And then as we do this, increase this test coverage with all these issues being gradually implemented, then we can increase the threshold of that GitHub actions. Because remember, I spoke about what a GitHub action is. It's an automated thing that happens when you do a pull request or an issue. And so when the pull request goes through, it will say, okay, have we reached this new threshold of 90% coverage? No, we haven't. And so because we haven't reached this 90% threshold, we're going to reject this pull request until you get to 90%. And whether or not you're working on test coverage related issues, we want to make sure that we get to this threshold before we get to the acceptance of pull requests. So that's a methodology that we've used and that we're trying to use in future, and trying to see how we can get there. So I know that we're an architectural class, so hopefully we can talk about some of the architectural challenges that we have. And I alluded to some of them, but I wanted to bring specific attention to a number of architectural challenges that we have. And so some of these are, how do we deduplicate uploaded files? So say, for example, you have a video that's really interesting, you upload it and it's up to your news feed, and people like it, then people forward it to somebody else. how do you create a link to that original file, or do you copy that file to everywhere else? And then what happens if somebody else uploads an identical version of that file? Do we now have two versions of the file, or do we find a way to link this new file to the old one? So essentially, how do you reduce the number of duplication of objects within the data store? And another one is, how do we reduce reliance on third-party cloud providers? So I know lots of people like to use Firebase. Everybody talks about Firebase. Peter, we can make notifications work much better with Firebase. We can do all these things with Firebase. You're 100% right. It does work very well. But if Talawa is going to be used by a local service like a Jamaican company or whatever, they may not have a reliable connection to the Firebase Google application. That's the first thing. Second thing, after a certain amount of time, Firebase starts to cost money. And does the organization have access to a reliable set of funds to actually implement that? And so now the reliance on a third-party cloud provider limits the appeal of the application. So how can you get the application to work without that dependency? And how can you make it such that if the person wants to have that dependency, you can add it in? And should that be built in, or should that be a part of a plugin? How does that? How do you actually implement that? Another big challenge is we could be putting out multiple versions of the API of the not so much the API but the mobile app, and so you could an organization may bring up version 1 of the API, and they at the time they download version 1 of the mobile app. But as people come and go, the people forget to upgrade the API to the latest version, but new employees are downloading version 2, version 3, version 4 of the mobile app. And a mobile app version 3 or version 4 may not necessarily be compatible with version 1 of the API. And so how do you write the code to say this is a version 1 feature, or this is a version 2 feature that we are not going to present on the screens? How does that work? And what methodology do we do to make that happen? And similarly, the reverse could happen. How do you somebody you now get the funds and somebody volunteers to upgrade the API? You now upgrade the API to version 10, but they still have people who are just using mobile app version 1. Now, how does that version 1 app integrate with version whatever 10 of the API? These are the types of things that we need to be constantly thinking about, right? And that comes under fairly squarely under architecture. And then once again, what sort of operating systems are we going to support? And it's not just iOS and Android. Are we going to be supporting Linux, Ubuntu, Kubuntu, Windows, and of course everybody's favorite Linux Mint? How do we make sure that these things are all compatible, and how do we make that work? And so the other questions is, how do we make this work both as a standalone system and as a cloud service? And how do we make it easy to use in both instances? So these are types of architectural things that are quite often need to be considered. And there are going to be many, many more with the architectures that we have with the code base. So the project that we have, the Talawa project, and of course there's a Patu project that I mentioned that is more Python based. I want to talk about what we need as on the whole, and what we need are the best contributors. Now, everybody starts thinking, oh, the best contributors, that means I don't know how to code. No. I have to hire people on a regular basis, and I have recruiters coming to me and asking me, Peter, what do you need? And I tell people that I need somebody who is hot but not a hot shot. And so the hot shot people are people that they're not easy to manage, and so therefore they can be disruptive and destructive of the culture of the organization that we're trying to create. And so what we need are people who can work together very well and also make a meaningful contribution to what we're trying to achieve. And so the best how. And so we need good ideas. We need meaningful pull requests. We've had pull requests where people change a typo and expect that to be viewed as something that is meaningful. No. We want to make sure that we have people that just generally need light supervision and that we're not constantly on them because it's a volunteer organization. We can't. It's hard for you to be saying, well, you need to do this by this particular timeline, blah blah blah. We need people who can work in a reliable way, and that automatically ties into the light supervision part. They need to understand how the framework works. Most importantly, we need to have stable, testable code. And this is one of the problems that we had in 2020, was that the code would work, that it didn't work. We had people showing us demonstrations and it just blew up on us. Blowing up does not happen anymore. Thank goodness. It's so much better. It's such a pleasure to use the code base right now. And so we need to make sure that you have stable, testable code. We need to have that. It's just mandatory. The code also needs to be very easy to read. The documentation needs to be good so that people can use it and automatically feel that it's worthwhile. And we need to have all the various deadlines that need to be met. And then there's some just general strategies for success with the repositories. So visit the projects, visit the websites, fork the repo. Fork means just basically copy it into your GitHub area, take a look at it, review the issues, create issues, contact members, get clarifications, build rapport, work on features, those sorts of things. And like I said, if you are not into coding, you can just try to break it. Just install it. If it doesn't work and it doesn't work for you, then that's an issue. I tried to install this thing, it doesn't work. Well, put in an issue and say the documentation says this, but it doesn't work that way, it works this way. And so try to do stuff like that. The user experience is not just the experience of the end user. It's the user experience of everybody that has to touch that software. And so therefore, feel free to go ahead and don't be shy. Just go ahead and do it. And I really want to make sure that I give a shout out to the women on the call. We've tried a lot to try and see how we can encourage women to be more in the projects. There's a great representation of women in the UDOLI and UTech system. I think it's about 40% women. In the United States, in the sciences and software development, I think that number is close to 20%. And yet when we have these various projects that we have, we get very few women just volunteering and taking a look at what we want to do. And so I just wanted to make sure that it's very clearly shown that there are very many different types of opportunities in very, very different areas. We really try to have an environment that is inclusive. And if we find that we have people are just not working out, that they're being rude or obtuse or whatever it may be, we just don't tolerate it. We just tell them, look, this is not working out. And we've had to drop a few people from the project in the past, and so we're not afraid of that. And then finally, this is the links that you should go to. There's a github.com/Palisados Foundation, and you'll see all the repositories that we have. The Talawa repositories, the Patu repositories, and there are a few others that may be of interest. But like I said, Talawa is my main focus because we have the most number of resources on that at the moment. Patu was written mostly by me, and having people constantly talking to me versus talking to 10 people on the Talawa project is a little better. If you want to get in contact with people on the Palisados Foundation Slack channel, just go to slack.palisados.org, register, and start talking to people. So that's it. I'm not sure whether you guys could hear me. I guess we can start having questions now.
Peter, thank you so much for your presentation. It was very thorough and very helpful in understanding what's happening and where we can contribute. Ladies and gentlemen, does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask? I think we're being invited to relax and not to be intimidated by the project or the environment. I know even for me, it's kind of a new environment to operate in. But I think what Mr. Harrison is trying to encourage us to do is to give ourselves the best chance to jump in. And once we have the right attitude, I'm sure we're going to be able to make reasonable contributions. So do you have any questions at all that you want to ask, or any suggestions? Anything more you want to find out about the project? Hello, are you guys there? Naomi, Jante, Jarell. Okay, so we have a couple of questions. Well, one, Jante is asking. Jante, you can put on your mic and ask if you want to. All right. I don't know, maybe her mic is not working.
Okay.
What is the front end of the app built with?
So the mobile app, the front end is written with a programming what do you call it now? Framework called Flutter, and Flutter has a number of advantages in that the framework works in such a way that you don't have to change very much code to make it work on iOS or Android. And so it's the latest hot thing. There's a Flutter developers WhatsApp group. If you're interested, you can just ping me about it, and you can join it. It's relatively active. It has maybe about 50 or 60 people, mostly Jamaican, almost all Jamaican, and it works well. There are a number of Flutter tutorials online. If you use Udemy, I think I've done one or two Flutter courses on online with it, just to get an understanding of how it works. And it's relatively easy to do, and I recommend that you give that a try. So that's on the mobile app front end. On the web management front end, it's all React, which is another relatively popular front end. And then on the APIs using Node.js, which is we try to find code frameworks that were popular to try and to encourage people to work on it. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about is that it sounds like this is like it can be fairly overwhelming, and I just wanted to say that the original Talawa code base was written by 4 UTech and UWI students. And then we got into the Google Summer of Code, and then they did some modifications of it. So the original code base was written by Jamaicans. The Google Summer of Code of 2021 was almost entirely mentored by Jamaicans. And 2 of them are students, or Jamaican students. One is Jason Gale, UWI, another one is 3 students, Brandon Chung of UTech, and another guy named Troy Anderson. And they worked with students from India to try and get the code working. And so if you think that this is something that is way beyond the capabilities of what you think you can do, you're wrong. And I just have to say, just 100%, you're wrong. And the fact that Jamaicans managed students in a Google program, and that we managed to get such good quality stuff out of it, just proves the fact that Jamaicans are capable of doing it. And we had Jamaicans creating the code in the first place. The documentation was created by Jamaicans. And as a result of that, I feel very strongly that you guys can actively get involved and figure out what's next.
Okay, so I see a couple of questions, but before I ask those questions, Jason Gale is actually here. He is one of the persons that Mr. Harrison just mentioned. He was one of the mentors in the Google Summer of Code, and he has graciously spent some time with me, and he has made himself available to help us with reviews and so on, and just make sure that we really understand what's going on. Jason is one of us. He's one of you. He's in third year here at UE. He's in third year here at UE as well. And so, as Mr. Harrison just said, I really do believe that um, once we open ourselves to the opportunity, it's very different from how we have operated in the past. But once we open ourselves to the opportunity and we apply ourselves, I believe that it's going to be a great opportunity for US students, for me, for Palisadoes Foundation. And it goes beyond this course, because once you have gotten familiar with the process, with the workflow, with the systems and the culture, which I think is really one of the really, really important points that Mr. Harrison just made, you'd be surprised at what you might find yourself doing after leaving here and how you might be able to contribute, on a longer term basis to the project. I think, yeah, I think that is the key is for us to really, I really would encourage everybody to start off with an attitude that it can be done, and with collaboration and encouraging each other and working together with those who have the experience through the communities that Mr. Harrison has given us access to. I do believe that you're going to be probably surprised at what you're able to do at the end of this course. I think I'm going to be surprised at what I'm able to do as well. So, Jason, thank you so much for being here. I don't know if you want to say anything. Maybe you want to put on the camera so your colleagues can see you. I think Jason answered one or two of the questions already too.
Okay, let me stop.
Okay, he says 1 second. Sure.
So one of the things I really want to talk about also is the ability of people who contribute, for them to show the quality of their code and the quality of their contributions to future employers or future academic advisors. And the fact that you've got the code merged, or your contributions merged into the code base, is really important.
Yes.
And that makes it better for you in the long run. Because one of the things is that if you do coding for UWI or UTech or many universities, that code quite often is closed to the university. And even if you do summer internships, once again, that code is closed to that particular organization.
Yes.
When you do stuff in the open source, it's completely open. Everybody can see it. They can see the quality of what you've done. You can describe what you've done line by line, whether it be documentation and or coding, and that is very important. So I've said enough. It looks like Jason is about to say some stuff, so I'll let him go ahead.
So yeah, everyone here actually knows me. So yeah, I'm Jason Gill. I was a mentor for Google Summer Code for the Talawa admin project. And just a brief summary, it's a React and TypeScript based project used to manage Talawa admin, and currently we can only manage organizations, members, and posts. So it's a new project, and personally I think it'd be the easiest to contribute to. So I sent the link in the chat as well. Yeah, those are my 2 pieces.
Right, so Jason got involved with the Palisadoes Foundation last year as a student on the Calico Challenge, and we weren't sure exactly what was going to happen in 2021 because of the impact of COVID, and we had no idea about what we're going to do, and so I just put in a request into Google to say, look, we're interested in the Google Summer of Code, and we got accepted. And I had no idea what to do. It was just absolutely just pandemonium. We had almost no contributors to the code, and then all of a sudden we had maybe 200 or 300 forks of Talawa, 100 and something forks of the API. We had pull requests, like dozens of pull requests per day. It was, and I just had to go out to the Jamaican software development community and just say, look, we need mentors, and I need anybody I can get. And if you look, let me see if I can find it. Just give me a second, but I will put it in the chat. But there's a I posted a lessons learned post on our blog about what things that we learned the day that the the, the Palisades Foundation grew up. And so I think this is something that would be very interesting for you guys just to take a look at. Let me just see if I can find the chat. Just give me a second here. Chat. Here we go. How do I chat? Doesn't seem to allow me. Oh, here we go. There we go. So if you take a look at that link, it talks about what we had to do to create structure to the software development process. And so this was new for me. This was new for very many people. And over the period of about 2 months, we tried to find ways to have more and more structure on what we were doing. It was a great learning process. It was definitely trial by fire. Dozens of Jamaican software developers came in and said they would contribute for a week or two, and then they disappeared, and we got some others to come in, etc. And so it was really great. And like I said, please feel free to contribute to this thing. This is not necessarily a project that needs to be always handled by the best and brightest and greatest. This needs to be a project that is handled by the people who are most interested. And if you're interested, feel free to contribute. All right, do we have any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, so I see one here. So what if we are really interested in the API but don't know GraphQL? Are there any material that you can recommend? There is a number of tutorials online that you can see on like YouTube about how it works and the various types of queries. I believe there are the documentation may have some sample queries. I'm not 100% sure. But fortunately, you can go on the Talawa API Slack channel and ask the question, what can I use as a tutorial for GraphQL? And there's a guy named Sumitra who will probably have some information that would be very useful to you guys as well. And there may be some other people that that can provide you with some assistance too. So jump in. And I'll tell you about GraphQL. I knew nothing about GraphQL, and 2 years ago, Jordan Jones, a student, 2 or 3 years ago, Jordan Jones at UTech, who now is at Orba, mentioned that we could probably use GraphQL. GraphQL is the latest thing. It's created by Facebook, and we should really be starting to think about it. And I started looking at it, and in my real work life, I converted a bunch of the code that we use for our billing system to GraphQL because I realized some of the advantages of it. GraphQL has a number of advantages from an architectural perspective. So for example, if you have a RESTful API and you want to get information on customers, you go to /customers/1 for customer 1 /customer/2. But if you want to do any sort of linkages or joinings of database tables, you can't do it. But with GraphQL, you can post a well-structured JSON formatted query to get the information that you want. And so therefore, you can do the left join, the right joins, the various types of dependencies of an RDBMS right there in the thing that you post and get results from it as a result. And so it's much more flexible and puts a lot more power in the hands of the developer, and so therefore, instead of doing 3 or 4 different RESTful API type calls, you can get away with one API call from GraphQL. So it's much more efficient. And if you haven't had experience with it, strongly recommend that you take a look at it. It really has made a difference in my organization, and it has made a big difference on the side of Talawa as well. Okay, so Jason put a link to the portal, and you can and you can get an access to the GitHub coding. Are there any other questions? Doesn't sound that
Anybody
way.
has any further questions? Okay. Thank you for that information on GraphQL. We'll definitely be checking that out. I think that is it then. Jason, you want to add anything?
That's it from me, actually.
All right. Thank you very much, Peter and Jason, for being here. I think the students told me they were very excited about this course and about the plans, and we will do our best to make a good contribution to your team and to the work that you're doing. We really, really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much.
And
If you are really interested in contributing and you want to contribute, even if it's just a paragraph of documentation, I strongly recommend that you go to the Talawa docs repository
yes,
and
right.
clone that. Take a look at the documentation. If the documentation doesn't look too right, just add a paragraph and just get yourself familiar with how to create an issue, how to create a pull
Yes,
request related to it, and then submit it. And then once it's merged in, feel the joy of having your contribution live on the internet immediately thereafter. That that is a good way to get started without worrying too much about code quality and those other types of things. Okay. All right, well, thank you very much.
okay.
This has been really good, and I wish you guys all the best. I wish I had um, when I was learning coding many years ago. I wish I had courses like this that were much more interactive and that provided or created the opportunity for me to explore. And kudos to Claudine about this. It's really, really, really something that we need in the Jamaican education system. And the fact that you guys have chosen to be a part of this course really says a lot. And I hope that this is the beginning of a very successful career in software development. And of course, with my enlightened self-interest, I hope that it kicks off with the Palacios Foundation and our repositories. So thank you very much.